Well, hello class. This video is going to help with the simplex method, and this is 6.2 and 6.3, which we've already covered live, but there were a lot of people gone the last couple days of class, and then we have one person working from home. So I'm going to make a video with an example from both types of simplex method, and then hopefully that'll help you be successful. So I'm going to share my screen, and then you can see what I'm writing. Okay, so this first example is going to be from 6.2. Remember, we skipped 6.1. It was a different method called a table method, getting you ready for the simplex. It actually really confused my students last semester, and so I was like, man, let's just do the simplex method. So this is going to be 6.1, or method, and this one is a maximum, and we have all less than or equal to constraints. So we're trying to find the maximum value that works for our constraints, and the constraints are less than. So they are in a bounded region, and we're trying to find the less than. Okay, so here's our, I'm gonna move this just a little so I can be seen in the video too. So our example is going to say our profit is equal to 10 times x1 plus 5 times x2, and the constraints are 4x1 plus x2 is less than or equal to 28, and 2x1 plus 3x2 is less than or equal to 24, and we know that x1 and x2 both have to be positive. So that last thing's always true, they have to be positive. So we're trying to find, oops, I didn't write the max here. Max of P. So we're trying to find the maximum value for P, for profit, that we're given, and so we're going to find the x1 that gives us the max profit. So we're looking for three answers: x1, x2, and profit. So the way that we started this was we're adding in a slack variable instead of having the less than sign. And if you think about it, a slack variable will pick up, if we're less than, let's say 28 on this first one, that slack variable will pick up any of the numbers when you don't quite get to 28. So if the maximum happens at 27, we had one number of slack. So these variables become part of our formula to help us use this method. And basically they're just slack. We're going to write our slack variables or equations, whatever. Basically we're going to write our equations with slack variables. Okay, so then from here, we're going to have, we just look at our constraints for our slack variables first. So we're going to have 4x1 plus x2, and then we're going to randomly add in an s1. Slack variable 1 is now equal, I'm going to put the equal over here, to 28. Okay, second one goes 2x1 plus 3x2 plus s2. Slack variable 2 is now equal to 24. And the kind of different one is the P, the profit. We actually move everything over to the left so that it becomes a negative 10x1 minus 5x2, and then it's going to be plus P equals 0. So we move everything to the left, making our x1 and x2 the opposite sign. Typically they go negative. Okay, so this is our first step. These are our slack variables. Then remember, after we write out our slack equations here, we can form our tableau. Okay, and that is formed by writing a matrix given what we have here. So our matrix is going to go 4 for x1, x2 would be 1, s1 would be 1, s2 is 0 on this one, p is 0, and it equals 28. Okay, And this is going to represent our S1, our S2, and our P. And the second one will go 2, 3, 0, 1, 0, 24. And the last row will go negative 10, negative 5, 0, 0, 1, 0. Okay, and then we're going to use our line down here as well. And we're here. This was our initial tableau. Then what we did from here was we had to do our pivot operations. So we looked for that pivot variable, and we did that by the most negative, which is going to be negative 10. And the smallest above the bottom row, above your dotted line, the smallest ratio here, where you're going to go, okay, this one is going to be 24 divided by 2 and 28 divided by 4. So this number divided by this number here, and this number divided by this number, and let's see what they are. That's going to give us 7 and 12. Which one's smallest? Okay, that's going to be this row here. So smallest, I wrote my arrow where you can't see it. Smallest here, that's all right. So we're going to, where those meet, we're going to circle, and that becomes our first pivot spot. So again, we went with smallest, smallest, smallest negative. It has to be negative. Okay, and then we find that pivot, and our first goal is to make that pivot 1. Now we found it, we're going to make it 1. So we're going to divide row 1 by 4. Sometimes they say 1/4 times R1, same thing. So timesing by 1/4, dividing by 4, same idea. So we're going to divide the whole row by 4, and the other rows are now going to stay the same. 1, 1/4, 1/4, 0, 0, 7. Okay. The next row stays the same. So 2, 3, 0, 1, 0, 24, negative 10, negative 5, 0, 0, 1, 0. Oh, my dog scared me. Okay, then from here, we know this is still our pivot. We're going to do our 2 pivot row operations at the same time. So our pivot is now 1, goal number 1. Now we're going to make that 0 and that 0 in that same column. So what we'll do is we'll take negative 2 times row 1, add it to row 2, replace it on row 2. Okay, then we're going to take positive 10 times row 1 plus row 3, replace on row 3. So we are going to create new rows 2 and 3 by multiplying by the 1 up here by this row and then adding. Okay, and again, I went over this in class. If you are not good at fractions, then you can just plug them in your calculator. This isn't an exercise. I mean, you should be able to do most of these fractions in your head, but if you can't, that's fine. Use the fraction key on your calculator. Okay, so from here, we're going to do the first row staying the same. 1, 1/4, 1/4, 0, 0, 7. And then we're going to take negative 2 times 1 plus 2 is 0. Negative 2 times 1/4 is going to be negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 plus 3 is going to give me 5/2. How did I do that again? Well, I already did it earlier, so I'm a little bit of a cheater. But on my calculator, I can just go, okay, I'm taking 1/4, 1 divided by 4, and I'm timesing that by negative 2, which gives me negative 1/2. And then I'm adding it to 3, which gives me 2.5. And then I can hit the math key over here and fraction, enter, and it'd make it 5/2. So, I mean, 5/2 isn't too hard to do, but it could be, you know, something a little more complicated. So we're going to do the same idea. Negative 2 times the 4 is negative 1/2, plus 0 is negative 1/2. I wrote fractions differently. And then 0 times negative 2 plus 1 is 1. 0 times 0 plus 0, 0. 7 times negative 2. I don't know how I got it. So 7, oh, it's a 24. I was looking at the wrong thing. So 7 times negative 2 is negative 14, and 24 will leave us a 10. I was thinking 10 was the number we were adding to. I was like, that doesn't work. Okay, so we did that first row. Then we're going to do 10 times all of these and add it to the last row. So 10 times 1 plus negative 10 is 0. 10 times 1/4 is 10/4. Minus 5 is negative 5 halves. 10 times 1/4 plus 0 is 10/4, which is actually 5 halves as well. And then the 0 will stay 0 because 0 times 10 plus 0. And then 0 times 10 is 0 plus 1 is 1. And then 7 times 10 is 70 plus 0 is 70. So we have now done one pivot, and we can see our profit has gone up to $70, and we're now have a value of 7 right now for our X1. So we're not done because we still have a negative indicator in the bottom row. So we need to use now this one, and we have one more pivot to get rid of this negative. And we have to look above the line, and we have to do 10 divided by 5 halves. And we have to do 7 divided by 1/4. And that's going to give me 28, and this is going to give me 4. So which one's smaller? Definitely this row. So we are going to have a pivot right there. So our pivot is 5 halves. How can I make that 1? Well, I can multiply it by, oh, I did it different on my work. I said divided it by 2.5, but that's fine. So we can do times it by 2/5 and times that by row 2, or divided it by 2.5 if you did decimals. I mean, I don't mind if you have decimals on this one because none of them are repeating. You have to be more careful if it's 1/3 and 2/3 and all those repeating decimals. So we're going to start with making that pivot 1. Excuse me. So the top row stays the same. 1, 1/4, 1/4, 0, 0, 7. Now this row is going to become 0, 1, negative 1/2 times 2/5 is negative 2/10. I was trying to think because I already reduced it. Negative 2/10 is negative 1/5. Okay, and you like how I just think of that one? I wrote part of mine in decimals too. Okay, so 0, or that one's already done, excuse me. 1 times 2/5 is 2/5. And 0 times anything is 0. 10 times 2/5 is 4. Because you do 10 times 2 is 20. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Okay, bottom row stays the same. One, I kind of made them look a little weird there, but okay, so now we still have our same pivot. It's now 1. Now we're going to add and make those two 0. So 1/4 and negative 5 halves have to become 0. So we'll take negative 1/4 times row 2, add that to row 1, and replace on row 1. So we're going to make that a 0 by making that negative 1/4. Then we're going to take 5 halves times row 2, make that a 5 halves. So I add those to make 0, plus row 3, replace on row 3. All right, so I'm going to do that step, and I'm going to write in my answers here. So 1/4 times 0 plus 1 is 1. Negative 1/4 times 1 plus 1/4 is 0. Negative 1/4 times 1/5 is 1/20th. 1/20th plus 1/4. 1/20th plus 1/4 is going to give me 0.3, which is 3/10. Okay, and then where was I? Negative 1/4 times 2/5 is negative 2/10 plus 0 is negative 2/10. Okay, so negative, oops, I wrote in the decimal. Well, it should be point. Let me do that again because I got a different answer. I have a different answer over here. So let's see, we were at negative 1/4. So I'm going to do negative 1/4 times 2/5 is negative 0.1 plus 0 is negative 0.1, which we can then change. Oh, I said negative 1/10. Oh, well, let's leave it a fraction. It is negative 0.1 or negative 1/10. Okay, so then from there we have our 0. 0 times anything plus 0 is 0, and then we have our 4 times negative 1/4 is negative 1 plus 7 is going to give me 6. I don't know why I got thrown for a loop on a couple of those. Oh well. Okay, this row stays the same because it was our pivot row, negative 1/5, 2/5, 0, 4. Last one, we do 5/2 times all of these, so 5/2 times 0 plus 0 is 0. So we kept our zeros. That should always happen. So 5/2 times 1 plus this is 0. 5/2 times negative, it's 2. 5/2 times 2/5 plus 0 is going to give me 1, and then you're going to get 1 here, and then you're going to get 80 here. Okay, ta-da! We have no more negative indicators. Such a pain, lots of steps, I get it, but go slow, make sure you don't make any mistakes on any of your numbers. So the last row, we now have our optimal solution, and that'll be a profit of $80. Now this is a traditional simplex, so that means that our answers are up here. So this is the X1, this is the X2. Our X1, our S2 are what we call non-basic. They would be equal to 0. So we would say our X1 equals 6, our X2 equals 4, and our S1 is 0, our S2 is 0, and our profit was 80. So profit, this last one, is 80. All right, and then it talked about entering and exiting. So for your homework purposes, look back at what we did, okay? As I enter, I go in the X1. What happens is that X1 becomes important with ones and zeros, and it becomes basic. And the S1, the first one here, first S1, becomes non-basic. So our exiting variable is, our entering variable is X1, our exiting is S1. Okay, so exiting, entering for each pivot. It might ask you some of those, so I wanted to make sure I showed that. All right, that's our traditional simplex. What if we wanted to do a minimize? So we did this as well the day before break. So this is part of 6-3. And this is, you're going to do a minimum with, so they're going to be greater than or equal to with your simplex method again. So this problem, we want, this is problem number 2. We're going to have our cost is going to equal 5x1 plus 6x2. And I believe this one's on your worksheet I passed out. Just, we were going to do extra problems when we came back, and well, now we're going to online. So you could find this on your worksheet as well if you want. Okay, and this is subject to the constraint of 4x1 plus 2x2 is greater than or equal to 8. And oh, and that's all we have on this one. Okay, x1 and x2 have to be greater than or equal to 0. So we have our cost and we have one constraint. So this one I think only has one pivot, which is good. So this video won't be too long. Okay, so what are we going to do if we have minimal? So this is going to be a minimum. We had to write a matrix of our original and do a transpose and go from there. So we're going to rewrite our minimum problem as a maximum, but our answer was different, the way we see it. So we had to be careful of those couple things. So we're going to write our matrix with our constraints first. So it'll go 4, 2, 8, and then for this one, it would become 5, 6, 1 for profit. And then we're going to transpose this matrix. So instead of going this way, now this one will go 4, 2, 8 this way, 5, 6, 1 like this. Okay, we are then going to use our transpose matrix and we're going to write our new maximum problem from this. So our new maximum dual problem, we like to use y's now in this one instead of x's. Okay, and we're going to use our slack variable will be our x's. So we'll have our p is going to equal 8y1. Okay, 1p equals 8y1. Then this one here is going to represent 4y1 is less than or equal to 5. And 2y1 is less than or equal to 6. So I've now rewritten this with less than instead of greater than, so that it's a maximum. And it doesn't have a lot of variables because it had one formula. I mean, one constraint. Okay, then from here, we're going to write our slack variables. So our slack will go this first line right here. Oh, and y1 has to be greater than 0. Okay, but our slack variables will go 4y1 plus x1 equals 5, and they will go 2y1 plus x2 equals 6, and negative 8y1 plus p equals 0. Okay, let's write that. This is our, so this is our full max, and this is our slack variables. And let's write our tableau. So it will go 4, 1. So let's label the top first. Y1, we don't have a Y2. Usually you will. Then we have an X1, we do have an X2 because we have 2 slack variables and the P, and then the answers over here. So it'll go 4, 1 for this one, and the answer way over here would be a 5. Okay, and these would be zeros. Then this one will go 2, 0, 1, 0, 6. This one will go negative 8, 0, 0, 1, 0. All right, how did I get that again? All right, I took the original information, always has the cost or profit, is always going to be your last row. I wrote a matrix with that last row in this one. I transposed it, rewrote it to a dual problem, wrote my slack variables with it using y's and x's. X's are now our slack, and then I rewrote it here. Okay, what do I do first once I finally have my tableau? I look for the negative on the bottom, which we only have 1. So this one's negative. You'll notice also they like to use a solid line when y's are involved instead of a dotted. Just preference. So here's our row. So we're going to look at 6 divided by 2 and 5 divided by 4. This one's 1.25 and this one's 3. So this one's definitely smaller. Get a new piece of paper here. Okay, where is our first or only pivot? It's going to be here on the 4. So our first goal, I think I can fit one more on this paper. So our first goal is to make that pivot a 1. Okay, so what you could do is pause here and see if you can answer it and then turn it back on. Totally fine. So we're going to take row 1 and divide it by 4. That's the same again as multiplying by 1/4. So this will become 1/4, 0, 0, and 5/4. Then the next row stays the same, 2, 0, 1, 0, 6. And the bottom is negative 8, 0, 0, 1, 0. Okay, so we're here now, and you could keep writing on what everything stands for if you desire. I kind of write it on the first one and the last one. Okay, then from here, we're going to take, our pivot is still here, it's a 1, so we're going to take -2, and we're going to times it by row 1, then add it to row 2, replacing it on row 2. Then we're going to take 8 times row 3, or excuse me, times row 1 plus row 3, replace it on row 3. Right? That's what we're going to do for our next one here. So -2 times this one plus this one. So we're going to keep the top row the same because it's our pivot row. So -2 times 1 plus 2 is going to give me a 0. -2 times 1/4 is -1/2, plus 0 is -1/2. Okay, and then -2 times 0 plus 1 is 1. -2 times 0 plus 0 is 0. -2 times 5/4 is -10/4. So -10/4 plus 6. I'm cheating. I don't know if it's called cheating. What did I say? 10/4 plus 6 is going to give me 7/2. Okay, so now I got a 7/2 there. And then the bottom row, I need to take 8 times over here. So 8 times 1 plus the -8, it's going to give me 0. So I have that I wanted. 8 times 1/4 is 8 divided by 4, which is 2, plus 0 is 2. And then 8 times 0 plus 0 is 0. 8 times 0 plus 1 is 1. 8 times 5/4 is 10. Plus the 0. So it was 10 plus 0. All right, so we have our solution here. And it's different because this was a dual problem. So we started at minimum, wrote it as a maximum, and our answer is actually here because we called this x1, we called this x2. So our x1 value is 2, our x2 value is 0, and our profit is 10, and that's our minimum here. The minimum is going to be 10 with, well, it could be called the maximum of the other one, but it's the dual, so they answer the same things. So the minimum value is 10, with x1 being 2 and 0. And y1 would be considered 0 now because it's no longer, well, it's a little tricky. I don't want to go into the basic, non-basic, and the dual method. Okay, so hopefully this video helped you with kind of understanding those two main methods. We have one more big method that I will make a video for you as well. There are a lot more examples in the textbook if you need it.